So we're continuing with Kings and Generals video about how to defend against the Mongols. And yeah, we covered Western Europe. Though now we're gonna move on to Eastern Europe, which I think had much more direct conflict with the Mongols themselves. As we go more eastward, it seems this series. So there's definitely gonna be a lot of changes as certain groups obviously encounter the Mongols way, you know, way more frequently and directly. So, yeah, if you want to watch the original video by Kings and Generals, the link is down in the description down below. It's always the first one. And if you enjoy my content and want to help me out, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help my small but humble channel grow, and, well, I'd appreciate it a lot. With that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let's watch How to Defend Against the Mongols Part 2 by Kings and Generals.
Eastern Europeans also had to deal with the Mongols. We will focus on the princes of Halych and Volhynia, today the western part of Ukraine, and on the lives of Danilo Romanovich and his brother Vasilko. They were the sons of Knyaz Roman Mstislavich, who became the powerful prince of the Rus principalities in the late 12th century, becoming Grand Prince of Kiev, renewing an alliance with the Byzantine Empire, and inflicting crushing defeats on the nomadic Kuman people. He even intervened in the war between Hohenstaufen and Welfs in the Holy Roman Empire, and was killed campaigning against the Welfs' Polish allies in 1205. His sons, Danilo and Vasilko, were no more than 4 and 2 years old. Halych Volhynia fell to independent boyars and rival Knyaz, while Hungary, the Cumans, Poland and the Lithuanians tried to raid or exert control. The city of Halych switched hands constantly, the young Danilo Romanovich fighting almost every year for his birthright. The Hungarian king, Andras II, for instance, installed his son Kalaman there as Prince of Halych. Steadily, the Romanovichi brothers brought their family back to influence. Alliances turned quickly. Danilo and Vasilko would ally with the Poles and Hungarians in one year and fight them the next. Plots and rebellions challenged them regularly. Danilo and Vasilko grew up fighting, soon becoming warriors famed for their strength, courage and skill, who took lead roles in combat. Gradually, they reclaimed their family lands throughout Halych and Volhynia, though the city of Halych itself remained under constant threat from Hungarians and rival Knyaz. By the start of the 1220s, the young princes were among the fiercest warriors in all the Rus lands. Danilo Romanovich was among the many princes, boyars and knyaz who attended the Great Council in Kiev, listening to the accounts of terrified Cumans seeking assistance against a frightening enemy from the east. A great host of Rus and Cumans, some of whom had been baptized to seal the coalition, marched into the steppes in the spring of 1223. Danilo was one of the prince's leading parties to observe this new foe, eager to make a name for himself with his courage, and to make a worthwhile comparison to his late father's and ancestor Volodymyr Monomach's victories over nomadic foes. But the Mongols would not be accommodating to the young prince's desires. The Rus prince—
Yeah, little did he know exactly who he was messing with. Yeah, that sucks.
Their retinues and the Cumans fought as skilled horse archers, with the Rus better equipped. They made a good show of themselves in the first skirmishes, capturing great numbers of Mongol cattle. They captured and executed a Mongol commander who had been scouting out the coalition. The Rus chronicles record the great excitement of the Cumans at getting their revenge on this Mongol leader, whom they called Gemya Bey. In the opinion of historian Stephen Powell, this was the ultimate fate of Jebei Noyan, one of the greatest generals of Chinggis Khan. Jebei's co-commander, Subedai, could not let this go unpunished. The Rus and Cumans pursued the Mongols deeper into the steppes, until reaching the Kalka River, where Subedai's troops turned about and crushed the alliance. The Halych Volhynian Chronicle records Danilo Romanovich fighting fiercely but suffering a wound to his chest, which, through adrenaline, he did not realize he had incurred until during the bedraggled retreat from the battle. So ended Danilo's first encounter with the Mongols, but it would not be his last. Though regarded as the greatest defeat the Rus princes had ever suffered to that point, it did not stop their continued fighting. The principalities remained a mess of shifting alliances, and the Romanovici grew in strength. The Halych-Volhynian Chronicle reports that from 1227 onwards, Danilo and Vasilko knew no peace. They continued to battle Poles, Hungarians, Lithuanians, rival princes, and Cumans, suffering defeats and enjoying victories. Relations with the Hungarians eased after the death of Andras and his son Bela IV's ascension as Hungarian king. Over the late 1230s, Danilo and Vasilko visited Bela and began negotiating a marriage alliance between their families. Danilo was on one of these trips in 1240 when the Mongols attacked Halych-Volhynia. Like many Rus princes, Danilo seems to have failed to take heed of the fall of the eastern principalities. In late 1239, as the Prince of Kiev, Mikhail Vsevolodovich, fled the city with the approach of the Mongols, Danilo was content to appoint a boyar, Dmitro, to govern it on his behalf, before departing for Hungary. This Dmitro commanded the city when it fell to the Mongols in the winter of 1240. Surprisingly, we are told the Mongols spared Dmitro because of his courage, and that he urged Batu to attack Hungary. Danilo learned of the Mongol attack when he encountered waves of refugees on his way back to Halych. Riding with only a small escort, Danilo fled into Poland, where he found his wife, children, and brother Vasilko had also escaped. Late in 1241, after the Mongols moved into Hungary, Danilo and his family returned to Halych-Volhynia. The sight that awaited them was beyond comprehension. We are told that they could not enter the city of Berestia on account of the stench of the corpses. At the city of Vladimir, not a single person was seen alive, its Church of the Blessed Virgin filled with the fallen. Whatever pain and anger Danilo felt, he did not let it despair him, but turned his wrath instead against the boyars, many of whom refused to listen to him or acted as independent lords. But Danilo's campaign had to be called off, with the return of Batu and Subaday's great host from Hungary. The Mongols dispatched a portion of the army to track down Danilo. He evaded his pursuers, though they wreaked more damage on the country as far as Volodava. Even then, the shadow of the Great Khan was not far away. Despite the common claim, the Mongol army did not retreat to participate in an election in Mongolia. Batu only went as far east as the Volga River, and began dividing up the western steppes to his princes and generals, assigning tax collectors in Rus lands, and putting down a Kuman rebellion in the steppe. One of Danilo's most hated enemies, Prince Mikhail Vsevolodovich, was put to death on Batu's order, for failing to show proper reverence to an icon of Chinggis Khan. While almost all Rus princes and church leaders paid homage in Batu's court on the Volga, Danilo tried to avoid any formal recognition of Batu's authority. Danilo was fortunate too that the destruction in Halych-Volhynia was not total, for he was quickly able to raise an army for a four-pronged assault on eastern Poland in 1243, while in 1244 he fought Rostislav Mikhailovich, a rival prince backed by Bela IV, to take control of Halych city. By this point, Danilo's son Lev was old enough to join his father in battle against the Lithuanians, Poles, and Hungarians.
Yeah, Danilo had quite the interesting life. Mainly just because he's a guy kind of like formed through warfare. Like all these constant fighting. It really is amazing. He really is a warrior through and through. And this is a really interesting part. Because Kings and Generals so far, from part 1 to part 2, seems to follow a person. Like, you know, instead of being a bit more general, you know, like last time he kind of covered about, you know, the plan of Western Europe and how no one listened to it. And now here we're following a lot of Danilo and his exploits. And, you know, essentially how he kind of feels like a very much like the underdog. Like he's constantly fighting all these other European powers, but also the Mongols are creeping ever closer. So he's just fighting everyone. So this is a very interesting character in life he seems to be leading. Very much one dominated by war.
The terror of the Mongols, Danilo saw the opportunity to consolidate his power, an opportunity his rivals grasped too. Danilo hoped the Mongols would not return, or at least not immediately, to give himself time to strengthen his position and fortify his cities. But in 1245, envoys came from the Mongols demanding his formal submission. Here the Halych-Volhynian Chronicle specifies Danilo's fear, as his fortification project was barely begun. With great trepidation, Danilo travelled to Batu. Tearfully saying goodbye to his family, he spent 25 days with Batu, who greeted Danilo warmly. Batu considered it wise for Danilo to have come of his own volition, though he felt it was late. As Batu gave Danilo fermented mare's milk to drink, he told the Khanaz that he was now one of them and should share in their custom. If the lengthy condemnation in the chronicle that follows this encounter...
Alright, that's a very interesting encounter. Again, like, the thing is once again, it just mentioned that he wasn't really willing to acknowledge Batu, but now, due to seeing just how weak he really is, and if Batu wanted to attack, he would be in a very vulnerable position due to his construction projects not fully being, completed. It kind of comes across like kind of a self-humbling or swallowing of his own pride to show up there, And again, the Batu kind of trying to integrate the conquered people into the Mongol way, with the whole, you ought to share in our customs, which is a very interesting, effective way to kind of do things when you're a conquering empire, try to get everyone integrated in some way. But again, that's something you do when you're trying to integrate people. So in a way, it's kind of like Danilo is submitting, So that like I said, this is a very interesting character that we're following. He seems to be keep doing this, follow one person, and I find that very interesting. This narrative approach that Kings and Generals has taken to this so far. I'm not sure if it's gonna all be like this. We have many more parts to go, but I find that interesting.
Is any indication, then Danilo hated his experience with Batu. Despondent, while returning to Halych-Volhynia, he met a Franciscan monk, John de Plano Carpini, who the Pope had sent as an envoy to the Mongols. Carpini had already met with Danilo's brother Vasilko, and now Danilo learned from the Franciscan that the Pope was seeking to organize a crusade against the Mongols, and an offer was made to Danilo that he could join such an alliance if he abandoned the Greek Church for the Roman. While not keen on the religious concession, the promise of military aid stuck in Danilo's mind. By the time Carpini returned from Mongolia and met with Danilo in 1247, he found Danilo excited by the plan, sending letters and envoys back with Carpini to the Pope. Carpini tells us that he learned much about the Mongols from the Romanovici brothers. Some of the anti-Mongol defense measures Carpini made, and we covered previously, likely came directly from Dmitry and Vasilko.
Alright.
Over the next years, Danilo Romanovich exchanged envoys with the Pope, while building up fortifications, securing his lands, and strengthening his army. The thought of armed support from the west against the eastern enemy could allow Danilo to punch above his weight. In the meantime, he used official subordination to Batu to his advantage. Bela IV finally agreed to a marriage agreement between his daughter and Danilo's son Lev, rather than an attack on the vassal of the Khan, which would raise Batu's ire. Danilo also acquainted himself with Mongolian equipment. In 1248, Danilo personally led an army to Bratislava to assist Bela against the Holy Roman Emperor. Here we are told that Danilo, his guards and their horses were adorned in Tartar armor, which was resplendent to behold. By 1253, in Dorohitsin...
Yeah, definitely the time period seems very interesting, as Danilo, obviously there is the sentiments of the anti-Mongol idea spreading around Europe, and obviously with his experience, he's more than on board making the marriage alliance, so definitely more than gun-ho about fighting the Mongols, which makes sense considering he's right next to them. So again, like, those closer to the Mongols see them more as the threat that they are, and will do anything to try to stop them, right?
Danilo formally adopted the Catholic faith while being crowned by the Pope's representatives as King of Ruthenia, Rex Ruthenorum. Unfortunately, no effort was made to provide material support to Danilo. He received a crown and nothing else. Once he realized this, Danilo quickly reneged on the commitment to Catholicism, which resulted in papal letters demanding his return to the fold. Danilo likely did not think highly of these threats.
Yeah, that's the thing. He literally, here, have a crown and nothing else. No help. Nothing that you wanted in the first place. That's the funny, that sucks in regards to the deal, you know?
Still, by the mid-1250s, Danilo felt strong enough to take the fight to the enemy. The constant battles with the Lithuanians and other neighbors made his armies experienced and cohesive.
Yeah, battle-hardened. Like I said, this man's life was very much... It feels like dominated by combat and warfare and, having to prove yourself, so... Yeah, again, like... Interesting guy. I guess, if anyone's gonna try to go for it, it's definitely him,
A powerful body of heavy cavalry, armed with bows and javelins, supported by Cuman light horsemen, and sturdy heavy infantry fighting with shield and spear. Fighting began first as skirmishing along border towns, the Mongols and Danilo trying to secure the loyalty of boyars and punishing those who defected. In 1255, perhaps following the death of Batu, King Danilo, his brother Vasilko, and his son Lev campaigned along the Bug River, taking several towns under their rule. But the Mongols struck back the following winter under the command of Keremsa. At Vladimir, his advanced troops were repulsed by Vasilko's troops. A pitched battle was avoided though, as Danilo had been gathering his troops at Kelm until the town was destroyed in a devastating fire. The Halych-Volhynian Chronicle blamed a damned peasant woman for the blaze, but the people and troops fled, assuming Kelm had already fallen to the Mongols.
Wow.
While Danilo tried
talk about awful luck.
to gather his forces, Keremsa tried his luck at Lutsk, an unfortified town where many refugees had gathered. He failed to ford the deep, freezing river, and the townspeople cut down the bridge before Keremsa's troops could cross it. His attempt to bombard the foe failed on account of strong winds allegedly throwing the stones back onto the catapults, according to the Halych-Volhynian Chronicle. Keremsa withdrew soon after, and was promptly removed from his position. Danilo was fortunate, as Keremsa was a poor commander, unable to take advantage of the Knaz's misfortune. The Halych...
Yeah, definitely. He didn't strike me as like a competent, like a commander, one with a lot of failures, at least in this specific, instance, So, yeah, good on that.
Volhynian Chronicle reports Danilo was never afraid of him. Keremsa's successor was a different story. Boroldai Noyan was an experienced general who had accompanied Batu and Subutai on the Great Campaign. He came with a great army too. The new Joshid Khan, Berke, wanted to tighten the leash on his western frontier. His messengers to Danilo in 1257 came with a simple message. Boroldai was going to march against the Lithuanians, and if they were truly at peace, then Danilo would join. After deliberation, it was deemed too dangerous to send Danilo to Boroldai, so Vasilko went in his brother's stead. Vasilko fought alongside Boroldai in a number of battles against the Lithuanians over 1258. Boroldai commended him on his ability. Meanwhile, Danilo navigated away from Boroldai, successfully avoiding him. An annoyed but placated Boroldai returned to the steppes.
Yeah, that's very interesting, is how Danilo is still, like, at times trying to, again, get off the thumb of the Mongols, but also placating them to some degree, and trying to use that to his advantage. He's still their enemy, even when he's, like, playing niceties. So again, the way he's like maneuvering, it's interesting. Like this is a very interesting life that we're seeing from this guy.
A year of rare peace followed. In Vladimir, in November 1259, Danilo and his family were celebrating the wedding of Vasilko's daughter when more messages came from Baroldai demanding Danilo and Vasilko in his presence. Vasilko, Danilo's son Lev, and the Bishop of Kelm went to Baroldai, whose fury at Danilo's absence left them trembling. He then ordered they demonstrate their loyalty by dismantling their fortifications. Reluctantly, they carried out Baroldai's will and tore down many of Halich Volhynia's walls and towers. Baroldai accompanied Vasilko to Vladimir and watched as Vasilko set fire to the great wooden walls and dug up the entrenchments. Baroldai even entered Vladimir, enjoying a dinner in Vasilko's home there. Only at Kelm was Baroldai denied. The garrison stood their ground, barring the doors and arming crossbows and catapults against them. Baroldai sent Vasilko to receive their surrender. Under the eye of Baroldai's officers and interpreters, Vasilko urged the garrison to submit, but as he spoke, he threw rocks at the ground. His men in the city knew how to interpret it and refused the order.
Again, like this is such an interesting thing. In some way, yeah, they're resisting the Mongols, but again, they can't fully at times be too openly hostile. But again, you're starting to see that this interesting, like, okay, now, the tensions are rising as I think the Mongols are catching on that these guys aren't as submitted as we think, and now here this really interesting ploy. It's a very dangerous game, I must say, that they're playing, especially with the Mongols, but again, they're very much the underdogs in the face of the horde, you know? But who doesn't love a good underdog?
Baroldai was frustrated, but moved on. Perhaps hearing of Danilo's flight to Poland, Baroldai took Vasilko and his army into the Polish duchies and unleashed a swath of devastation there, sacking several cities and departing with considerable loot. Danilo avoided this too by fleeing to Hungary.
He's determined not to meet with these guys. It's kind of hilarious, this little cat and mouse game. Danilo is like, I am not going to meet with you.
Danilo returned to Halich, having been humbled. He spent his last years quietly, passing from illness in 1264, and Vasilko died a few years later. Danilo's son Lev succeeded the throne as king of Ruthenia. Lev Danilovich did not try to resist the Mongols. Instead, he used them. To deal with raids by the Lithuanians or Poles, Lev regularly requested support from the Khan or Prince Nogai, who would in good order provide an army to protect Lev's border. He learned the lessons of his father and enjoyed a long reign of comparative stability compared to him. The rule of his family continued into the early 14th century.
Okay, that's very interesting. Danilo was definitely going against them and finding ways to try to go against the Mongols. Lev, again, just, okay, I'll just I mean, technically, they're under the Mongol banner, but it's like, well, I guess I can use the Mongols to face my enemies and rivals, so that's a very interesting thing. But yeah, just seeing how deep the horde, or close the horde, well, how they were in Europe, it really goes to show you just the scope of the Mongol Empire, all the way from Europe to the east, the Far East China. It is insane how far they were around and everywhere they got, you know? Dang it. You know, I'll just end the video right here. Yeah, I'll end the video right here, and tomorrow we'll look at how the Malmuks in the Middle East, dealt with the Mongols. So, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow, eh?